Welcome to the Catch My Breath Vaping Prevention Program. My name is Marlena Mahiran and I run the TUPE program for all of the middle schools and high schools in Nevada County. I'm really excited to welcome you to this program where today we will be learning all about the health risks of vaping and e-cigarettes. Before we begin though, I want to explain what the Catch My Breath program is and how it will work. The program is made up of 4 35-minute sessions that will give you crucial information about e-cigarettes so that you can make your own informed choices. Over the next 4 sessions, you will complete activities where you will learn some of the health risks of e-cigarette use, think about why people begin using them in the first place, learn some refusal skills as well as some ways to resist peer pressure, discuss some of the advertising strategies that Big Tobacco uses in order to try to get you to start using their products, and then finally make your own slogan and warning label for e-cigarettes. Before we really get going today though, I would like you to pause this video and click on the link that your teacher shared with you for the pre-test. What do you know? Don't worry if you don't know all of the answers in this survey. It's just designed to give us an idea of what students know and don't know before beginning this program. So please pause the video and complete the survey and then come back and continue. So as I mentioned, today we were going to be talking about the health risks of e-cigarettes and vaping. And I use those terms interchangeably, so you'll hear me say both. So I want you to stop and think about whether or not you believe that vaping is a healthy alternative to smoking. It's interesting because years ago when the first e-cigarettes were developed, they were designed in order to help longtime smokers quit. The idea was they could gradually reduce the amount of nicotine that they were using until they were no longer addicted. However, very quickly, Big Tobacco realized they were missing out on a huge money-making opportunity. That's when they realized they need you. Every year, millions of people die from smoking-related deaths. So because of that, they need to find new customers and new users of their products. That's when their focus switched with vaping and they started targeting young people. And we'll take a look and see how they have been so successful in that area. So when you think about vaping and whether or not it's less harmful than smoking, the reality is we don't have all of the information yet. E-cigarettes simply haven't been around long enough for us to have any sort of long-term studies on them. However, what we do know is that they are not harmless. Even if they are less harmful than cigarettes, that does not mean that they're healthy for you or have no risk with them. So cigarettes and other tobacco products can cause cancer, heart disease, and even eventually death for their users. And although e-cigarettes have fewer toxic chemicals than cigarettes, they are still harmful. They still can cause cancer and they can still line your lungs with a lot of really dangerous chemicals. So the first activity that we're going to do is you should have a worksheet that came with this session. So if you could open that up, and I want you to write down what you have heard, seen, or thought about e-cigarettes and vaping. And there's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to get a sense of what you know about this already. So please pause your video and answer the question for activity 1. Before we get going with what some of the health risks are, I want to make sure you understand how e-cigarettes work. And they all have similar components, even if they don't all look the same. There's lots of different products on the market, and they definitely don't all look exactly the same. But they all have a battery inside. They all have what's called an atomizer coil that heats up the e-liquid that is either already inside the vape, comes pre-filled, or that the user fills. They all have an absorbent cotton material that soaks up that e-juice. And then as you saw with that little animation, the user inhales on the product, and when they breathe in that product, it releases an aerosol. Now this is interesting because it's not called aerosoling, it's called vaping. And if you think about that, that in and of itself is a marketing strategy. Vapor sounds like water, like steam, like something healthy for you. Where when you think of an aerosol, you might think of hairspray or bug spray or spray paint. The reality is, however, it is not a vapor. It is indeed an aerosol when those chemicals heat up. Again, this is a marketing strategy that Big Tobacco uses in order for you to think that it is not harmful. Now, the majority of e-liquid contains a chemical called nicotine. A lot of the products claim to be nicotine-free, but when they've been tested, over 95% of them do in fact contain nicotine, which is highly addictive. There are two different types of vapes. One is called a pod-based system, and that would be the one on the left that looks like a little flash drive. This is an example of a Juul, which you've probably heard of, and it comes with a little cartridge on the end that is already filled with e-liquid. Now, all pod-based systems contain nicotine. There are no exceptions to that. The one on the right is a mod-based system, and this was sort of the first generation of e-cigs. They tend to be bigger, heavier, and they tend to produce a bigger cloud of vapor when the user uses it. And in this case, usually they refill the e-juice into the product. So I mentioned that nicotine is a highly addictive chemical, and nicotine comes from the tobacco plant. I'm sure you've heard of it before, and it's the chemical in the product that makes somebody addicted to it. It is a stimulant, so it speeds up heart rate. It can actually make somebody feel anxious if they're not used to it, and our brains become dependent on it very quickly. Now, like I mentioned, some of the short-term effects of nicotine are feeling anxious, a rapid heartbeat, maybe feeling a little bit more alert, that kind of thing. Some of the long-term risks of using nicotine are addiction, and when a young person uses nicotine, they're more likely to become addicted to it than an adult, and they're also more likely to become addicted to other substances as well. Up until about the age of 25, our brains are still developing, and so nicotine affects you differently than it would to your mom or your dad. Over time, it can cause cancer. It can affect your ability to have babies. It can cause lung disease, emphysema, so lots of things that are really harmful and life-threatening. So when we look at these different products, this is a pack of cigarettes, and a pack of cigarettes has about 20 milligrams of nicotine. A Juul pod has 41.3 milligrams of nicotine. So one Juul pod is equivalent to about 41 cigarettes. And I've talked to some teenagers who may go through several pods a day. So this is a very high, dangerous level of nicotine. This is a Fix pod, another product on the market. It's equivalent of 75 cigarettes. And then the biggest one here, the Soren, which those are the devices that look a little bit like a highlighter pen, is equal to about 90 cigarettes. So imagine if somebody is going through one pod a day of that. That is a really high level of nicotine. And actually, up until this time, we have never had a product on the market that could deliver that much nicotine. So we definitely do not know the long-term effects of what that could do to a person's body. So I'm sure you're aware that there are many different types of flavors on the market, and this is where I always find it really interesting when the tobacco and vape companies try to say that they're not marketing to young people, because so many of their flavors are flavors that would be appealing to children and to young adults. Things like gummy bears, s'mores, Skittles, cotton candy. They argue, oh yes, adult smokers like these flavors, but to me, it's really clear that they're actually targeting you. They're trying to get you to try these highly addictive products so that ultimately they can make more money. Now, states have different rules and regulations around how old you have to be to purchase and use e-cigarettes. But here in California, the legal age is 21. So anybody using or buying vapes and vape pods and e-liquid before the age of 21 is breaking the law. We are now going to take a closer look at some of the ingredients in e-liquid and e-pods. The reality is we actually don't know what all of the chemicals are that are in these products because up until now the companies have not been required to list them, but there are some main ones that are found in the majority of the products. So please pull your Session 1 worksheet back out and answer the questions after you read about the different chemicals in these products. Were you surprised by any of the ingredients and the effects that they have on our body from the last activity? I know I was when I first started learning about some of the chemicals, and what's interesting is that our lungs actually have no way of getting rid of those chemicals. Our lungs were only designed to process oxygen and air. So whenever we breathe anything into our lungs that contains chemicals, those chemicals get stuck inside our lungs and can line the lining of our lungs, and our body does not have a way to easily process them and get them out of our body. So it's very risky to our lung health to be inhaling these chemicals. For our last activity, we're going to be thinking about some of the negative consequences of e-cigarettes that we have learned today. So on your worksheet, you will first list some of the negative consequences, and I want you to think beyond health consequences, like how might somebody who is vaping or using e-cigarettes, how might that affect their relationships in their family, or things that could happen at school and that kind of thing. So kind of think beyond just the physical impact when you're answering the questions. So please pause the video and go ahead and answer the questions for activity 3. So some of the possible answers you might have come up with is that they cost a lot of money. You can become addicted. Could be a poor example to your younger brothers and sisters. You might get in trouble at school or at home since it's not legal for you to be using these products. You might not be able to play sports that you want to play, although right now during COVID that of course is tricky anyway. But in more normal times, sometimes students get suspended from those activities that they want. You could harm your body long term. And if that liquid is swallowed or ingested, it can be fatal. And unfortunately, there have been a lot of young children who think that e-liquid is some kind of food since it smells so fruity, and they drink it. And even a drop or two can actually kill somebody. So it's very, very dangerous to leave these products lying around. That brings us to the end of Session 1. Next week, we will be talking about how to make your own choices and choices that are going to help you stay on the path and achieve the goals that you are hoping to. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.